Hello. Yeah, I'm Timmy Ghiurau. I'm innovation leader at Volvo Cars. And the title of my talk, like always, is Snap Back to Reality, Here Comes Gravity. But the content is a bit different. I keep updating it, adapting it. The reason why I use this title is like, of course, it is inspired by Eminem lyrics, but in the same time describes a bit the journey and the complexity that we're facing. We're all dreamers. We want full immersiveness. We want like the technology to progress. But then, corporate culture hates you, lack of finances, people are not prepared, technology is not ready. And as we were discussing now, how come every time we talk about about the metaverse, the internet is not working properly? Like you have a Zoom call, you convince people, hey, this is the future, but like you can't have a proper conversation. And then of course, working in automotive industry, which is like one of the most traditional industries out there, it's like, gravity really hits you. It needs to be safe, it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be, like secure and so on. So I do come from Volvo Cars, and this is kind of our latest product that we've launched a few weeks ago, EX90. It's our first, electric SUV. It's a new platform. And why this is special, it's because it's the first product I started working on even since I was a student. And it's the product that I saw from a sketchboard till all the iterations. And we used VR and simulations and real-time 3D a lot into it. And a few weeks ago, it just hit the road. And of course, a lot of challenges, a lot of iterations to actually make it work and to make it the product that it is today. So as you know, Volvo has a long history of innovations, and especially around safety, where since the beginning, it was always about the human. Like, how do we actually protect the human? But now, we are moving into a more complex world, and, what about safety, not only in the car context, but what about society safety? What about planetary safety? How do we actually tackle that without doing greenwashing and actually, practice what we preach? And it's super complex. And to do that, we really needed to see, okay, how do we actually look into reading the environment, adding a lot of sensors, adding a lot of software to the car to be able to provide all these features. And then also with all these sensing technologies and complex LiDAR to actually make sense of what's around us, making sense of objects to be able to create a product that is safe. But also, how do we actually make it inclusive? How do we actually enable more users to have access to this? And I mean, this is what we call Project EVA, where we actually gave away all of our research around safety for the past 50 years to the whole world, so people can actually access, the research that we've done, UX research, safety research, human factors, crash tests, and so on. So we wanted to set a standard also in last few years, I think the only safety crash in automotive, the standard was just a male body, like a male crash doll, as we call it. But we wanted to see, okay, we have different bodies. We do have different construction of our body. How do I actually make that as a standard so people also look in those scenarios and not just do the crash test just to pass, get some points from whatever organization and just being able to push a product. And then taking care of the people inside the car, but also how do I actually look at sensors and doing it like in a secure and respect privacy. Yes, of course, we want to be able to detect if people are too tired or if they are like getting distracted, by technology and so on. But how do we actually capture that and make it in a way that it's secure, that we respect privacy, and also with the potential of saving a lot of lives? And then we're moving more into an ecosystem where, it's got complicated, especially with electrification. I mean, it's not just enough to have electric cars. It's also the way you produce them, it's like the whole supply chain. It is like, how do you connect to the grid? And that also opens a lot of opportunities, like to be good for society as well. Just not having it a product that it's out there and, we have an electric car and that's enough, and now we can all be happy and we check that mark. It is more complex than that. We need to collaborate with policymakers, with energy providers, and actually think about scenarios more in an ecosystem way. Not just, okay, we deliver a product and then at the end of the day, it's like on the consumer's point of responsibility. And I have this project that I like a lot, which explains a bit some things that we discussed this morning in this kind of marathon that we have, towards efficiency and always like pushing tools just to produce faster, to sell faster. There is also in the way we might lose maybe the empathy for the user, for the traveler. And I'll just show this video quick if it starts. Should start, right? As I said, internet again. Yeah, it's not starting. Good. I'll skip it anyways. The point is, like, we're describing, for instance, like the history of transportation and how we moved from, days on horseback to get to one point to the other, and that when we got, cars, we were able to do that in a few hours, and now with aeroplanes and, with the dream to go into space, we reduced that time a lot. But in this strive for efficiency, we were forced to actually act like machines. Everything is time slotted. You're in traffic. You need to go from work, from this time to that time. And then, that restrains a lot of the freedom that we have. And to be able to answer all these questions, a few years ago, we were asked by our management, how should we actually think about innovation? How should we actually prepare for the future? And we started this department called Open Innovation Arena. And it's this place where we open doors to everyone. We collaborate with startups, with universities, students, and it's more like big variety of people there. As I said in the morning, we're like a bunch of misfits. You have artists, you have engineers, you have researchers, experts, and we're all there together. And our thesis is that we need that type of temperature and diversity in skills and in perspectives to be able to actually prepare for the future. And that's, I think, the key and where the emergence happens. And it's like the first law of cybernetics around emergence. Like, we need a big pool of diversity. Like, we work with designers, we work with people in the city hall, with traffic authorities. And to be able to do that, we need to speak the same language. We need translators. We need to actually understand that, okay, if we are invited probably to go to a panel like the one before, where you sit there with people from the EU Commission or the traffic authorities, sometimes they invite you not because you might bring a solution. They actually invite you that it's an intervention because you're the problem that causes something. And we need actually to learn to think like that, because we have that mentality, oh, we're like a big corporation, here's a product, it will save lives, it will be okay. But at the end of the day, sometimes that comes with a cost, and we need to be prepared to have those conversations. And our task is to look into the unknown unknowns and understand what is out there. How do you translate that to what we have? How do we translate it to our kind of collective intelligence? And with that diversity, be able to actually act and make artifacts, products, services, prepare universities with different curriculums. And what this means, an abstract version of it, in a way, we practice a school of innovation for the rest of the company and internally, where we actually prepare other departments to actually look into new tools, actually make their work more efficient, improve their processes. And with that, we buy ourselves trust, so we can actually look at things, more on a different abstraction level, like what's our role in the society. If you have some of our values, some of our technologies and knowledge translated to something that is needed for a specific community or specific market. Then, of course, we're exploring, how do we come up with new business and sustainable business models, and also how do we take our DNA and be able to have solutions and be able to have value in other domains. And to do that, the way we set it up, we do foresight, strategy, and experiments by scouting, paving, traveling the way to be good in the world, for the society, and at a personal level. And it does sound complicated, but as I said in the beginning, like throughout all my journey and my career, I was always having this question, like, how am I a creative or am I a nerd? How do I find that intersection where I can actually think outside the box? Because to think outside the box, you need a box. And automotive for me was like a pretty big box, and I love the challenge. Like, I come from gaming industry and creative industry, and when I came there, snap back to reality, here comes gravity. Yeah, to make a car, you can't do it through Zoom. You can't, need to be there. You need to go through a lot of iterations. It takes 7 years from a sketch to actually be able to put it out of the door. It is super complex. And now, being in this place and stage where I have a friend, Jay Lata, who couldn't make it today. He was like invited as a speaker as well. But in his words, what he says about the automotive industry, that we are in a midlife crisis with borderline disorder. Like, are we a mobility provider? Are we producing cars? Are we sustainable? Are we premium? Are we a tech company? So many unknowns. And to be prepared for it, we need to think a bit different. And we need to see how do we move from that vision to a solution, those iterations that we need to do. And as I said in the morning, decide what not to do, like sticking to a good path and see how we can do that better in the world. And for that, we need to think in strategy, but also tactics in the same time. Look at the long term, but also see what we have in our hands now and how actually we can take action and improve what we have. So over the years, saw a really interesting progress between, the inventions of the smartphone and the progress of the chipsets and, how the computers got lighter and lighter, we got much power. And then also with XR, right? Like we saw like big progress. I remember trying, the first Oculus some many years ago, and then trying Vario, and Vario destroyed my life after because I couldn't wear any other headset. But like, just, the progress in just a few years, just seeing, from an idea, a vision, to actually have all the tools in our hands, and still finding excuses that, oh, we are not there yet, so we get lazy, right? Like, when we have all the tools, it gets a bit overwhelming. You don't know which ones to pick, and then you forget to think about the content better. But we were thinking about, this future, and, thinking, okay, we need to strive for self-driving cars, we need to strive for complete safety, so nobody will ever die in a car. But actually, to achieve that future comes a lot with, we need to understand the challenges ahead, we need to understand human behavior, we need to have a systemic thinking, like system-level safety, how do we do it, in an ecosystem level, and the same with sustainability and energy. But what I found out, and was really interesting, we did a lot of tests with people, and we had this collaboration with the Don Norman Institute, and we looked at how people interact. And we have this rig, like a car. We call it the Wizard of Oz method. So we actually have somebody driving in the back seat, but the users think that that's a full level 5 self-driving car. What we found out, the moment that people trust the system and they think that, oh, the car can drive itself, they start scrolling Instagram. And that made me reflect. It's like, So all these billions and billions invested in these technologies by all these big companies, just for people to scroll Instagram in their free time. But then I was thinking, who are we to tell them how to spend their time? Should we play this big broader role? And as we were discussing this morning, the role of design is, can we nudge people to a more healthy behavior? And that through those narratives, if we can describe a future like this, or maybe not, can we actually improve our culture and, like, at a society level, collaborate to create a better future? And that makes us ask better questions. And we need to move from learning to understanding. How do we put all these pieces together? Technology, tools, content, vision, ecosystem, business models. So the way, going to VR now, the way we've been using it to actually produce the car that I showed in the first slide, we did use VR and virtual experiences in product design, the classical demos, like you look at different car concepts, you evaluate materials, you evaluate the lighting. Then we take that car and we add features to it, like we can simulate functionality, and we do a lot of user experience testing. And as the screens are taking more and more the space in the car, we need to actually see how does that affect attention, how does it affect the user experience, the human behavior. Then, of course, it requires a lot of training. I was discussing with somebody outside that, just to move to electrification, it's a huge effort. Like, you take a company that's like 40,000 people, and then you have to tell them tomorrow, hey, from tomorrow we only do electric cars. It's like almost impossible because I have so many systems and like thousands of suppliers and so many complex components. So to be able to get there, you also need to retrain and prepare like new competences, like to actually develop something like that. And when we are ready with our testing and validation and simulation, we can tell a story. We can go into the branding, people can actually configure their product, and then you put it in a context that is kind of relatable to them. So in this field, we did quite a lot of activations over the years. Like maybe 5-6 years ago, we had this car configurator in all our dealerships, and then with Google and Meta, we had this, configurable car, so you don't need to download another app. You just search for Volvo XC40 or something, and then you're able to configure it and try it in AR directly. Then we said, getting back to the democratization aspect and being open, as we were kind of giving the patents away on the seat belt and the safety research away, we say, why not giving away the 3D model of the car? So together with Unity, a year and a half ago, we launched this showroom template just to showcase kind of the state of the art in graphics on how to do like a car configurator, how to take advantage of the new HD pipeline from Unity. And we were thinking that we can engage with the community easier, because every time we're talking with a company, for instance, Unity, Vario, NVIDIA, or different startups or universities, they always asked, can we have access to this car model? Can we actually do a demo showing the car? And I was like, yeah, but it takes months to go through legal, brand, all the approvals, to get it. So we said, why not making this platform where we can actually shortcut this, and we have a template, we always have the latest model up to date, and we let the community build it. We let them to actually showcase how they can use, the data set, a healthy data set, to actually create these experiences. And then, again, together with Vario, some years ago, we were thinking that it's interesting to do it, in a lab and look at the car, but it's so different to when you drive it. So we developed this technology where we were able to drive with the headset on, and I used to call it like Tinder for designers, because you could drive and then you could just swipe between car concepts and models and then decide, okay, we can go for this one or that one while you drive. And that, the designer of the EX90 being able to drive the car 3 years before it's released, it's like a huge moment, because we can capture the mistakes or things about human factors, visibility, ergonomics, way, way earlier in the process. And then with eye tracking and so on, we can look at perceived quality. We can see how user perceive different screens and objects in the car, quality. But then we said, okay, we did a showroom template. And actually today, we launched this together with Unit. It's a bit of a silent launch. Tomorrow will be a bigger boom. Now we said, why not opening up our test tracks from Sweden, where we test all the cars for the past 20 years. Sensors, crash tests, handling, vehicle dynamics. And we did a digital twin, like LiDAR scan, quite detailed, of our Hellered test track in Sweden. And it has all the details. And again, we try to take advantage of Unity's latest and greatest tools in terms of how do you draw a road, how do you import LiDAR scan, how do you actually add realistic forest to mimic kind of the Scandinavian nature. And with all these tools, you're able, to create your own test track. You can build a game. You can play out with sensors. And, the classical moose that I always try out. The story behind this is that we were working with an agency 5 years ago to that car configurator, and we were showcasing the large animal detection. And when I found out how much we paid for that moose in that experience, I decided, I'll make that moose work for the money. So in every simulation, crash tests, marketing materials, I make sure that the moose is there. Even in the Vario demo, you can see the albino moose in Venice just crossing the water.
Welcome to see it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, we were trying to kind of give an example to the community. Like, yes, we use this product simulator to actually capture all these scenarios. We were testing, how would people approach the car, and then the car should detect who the driver is, and have the welcome lights and all the settings. And we tried all these things in VR and with this simulator. So we decided to open up and give it to community. But then, if we think about moving beyond the tools and the efficiency, I always had this mind, what if we have a virtual test track, like a virtual road trip? Like, imagine that you have to drive to Stockholm from Gothenburg, and you're bored and it's raining, and then a friend of yours gets this message. It's like, hey, Timmy is driving to Stockholm, and you can join him in VR. So you put the headset on, and then you're next to me as an avatar, and we can tune in our favorite songs, have a conversation, so you can, kill off the time together, and, have like maybe carpool karaoke or something. And I was thinking about that, and then another scenario that I'm working on, it's like a time machine. Like, together with Vario, like, I'm trying to push a bit the technology, and I'm working now on this experience where you start in the 50s, and you drive a Volvo from the 50s, and when you switch the music, the car morphs from that car from that period. So you're in the 50s, the 60s, and then you have the today's car, and maybe in the future, no car, you just float on the road, as that we try to achieve as well. And to do that, we're looking, okay, I'll just take all the tools that are there, made myself an avatar with Ready Player Me. Looks a bit like me. I had to have a haircut to look like my avatar instead of, I couldn't find a proper haircut for the avatar, so I had to do it the other way around. And then, just inviting some friends, going for a trip. But that is possible because we have all these tools. And as I said, we do love this collaboration. We looked at full immersiveness. And to be honest, it was the only headset we could use. I mean, Volvo is doing VR since the 80s. We had these super expensive and complex systems. And, as the technology progressed, we had to keep up. But we also pushed the industry to create better technologies for our needs. And for instance, Vario was the only one that we could actually use it for verification and validation. And if you move into, material and lighting, you need to have accurate materials and colors. Like, I imagine when I put the headset the first time on our head of design, and I was like, oh, wow, finally I can see, all the details in the materials. And when you perform UX research, you need to be able to read to actually validate a system, and that's super important. And one reason why I actually got into VR, because I am at core like an introvert, and I realized the power of VR. Like when the CEO came the first time, I put the headset on, and I had to teach him how to walk, what not to touch, where to go and not trip. And he acted like a toddler, because that's what happened when somebody puts the headset on. And with Carlos, we are discussing this. This is what people do the first time when they're in VR. They try to see their hands. Then they start to see what is like the locomotion system. Should they teleport? Should they walk? So after I'm teaching the CEO how to do it, when he takes the headset off, I'm like, hey, dude, don't forget I taught you how to walk. I took care of you. So now let's have an equal conversation, right? So it's a bit of like hard reset. You put it there, and then when you can have like a normal conversation. Because when you're like introvert, it's like really really complex, and you can be intimidated by, like, oh, it's like the big boss coming, we need to prepare the demo. But when you're actually doing that with them the first time, they never forget that you're like, okay, you're the guy that taught me how to walk, and you saved me not to fall, in the lab or the studio. But then, visuals are not enough. We looked at haptics, and every time we are doing some virtual testing, people ask, yeah, when can I actually feel the screen? Or like now that we work with these virtual concepts, can we actually see and grab the steering wheel? I don't feel it. And we looked together with Tesla Suit some time ago, and some master students of ours did this interesting project where they were using the motion capture capabilities of the suit to train an ABB robot to have a more natural human movement. So it was training the sensor of the car to open the tailgate when you put your foot under the tailgate. And that didn't work for a reason, because the robot that was training that sensor had like super linear movements. But with the Tesla suit, we recorded more natural human movements, which improved the sensor, therefore the product. So as I explained in the morning, the reason why I got into VR and automotive is because I was dreaming of that future where we will walk around and have, these glasses and lenses, and we can look at objects and we can interact with them. And to be able to achieve that, you need like a huge stack of sensors. And we see that in the headsets, we see that in our mobile phones, adding more cameras, LiDARs, gyroscopes, and so on. And that's exactly the same sensors we have in the car to make sense of the environment, of the objects that the car needs to be aware, and we need to be aware. So as we're learning from automotive, we also look into robotics. I had this friend, Elena, from Stockholm, and she called me one day and is like, Timmy, why aren't always going to XR conferences, but in terms of robotics and AI, you guys are non-existent, and you work with self-driving cars? And it's like, oh, wow, that's true. I mean, if you look at the papers, most of the papers in robotics and AI comes from Toyota, Hyundai, and so on. So it's like, why we are not there? Why we are not experimenting with this? So we started a robotics lab, and we used the pipeline we had previously with the simulation stack and like the data sets that we are training, for instance, for our sensors, to actually see if we can do it for robots. And we looked at, how do we improve and teach the robot to do simple tasks? How do we actually move it, not only the manufacturing robots, but like kind of assistants that can be around us in the future? So we're doing a bit of research on making sense of the space, navigation, and those things we can do in a controlled environment, and the learnings from there, we can apply it there on the cars or drones or other mobility systems. And I will just give you a quick teaser of what we do in this lab. So as I said, we're experimenting a lot with various technologies, and from training sensors to detect objects to actually do user experience testing, because most accidents in these semi-autonomous cars happen because of mode confusion. The users don't know when the car is in control, and the car doesn't know that the user doesn't know. So it's like how to actually communicate that. And therefore, we need to do so many iterations and capture every scenario and test things that are either too rare or too dangerous to test in real life. Like, as I said, making the moose cross the road and actually see if the users respond. We won't test that in real life because it's super dangerous. I actually saw a moose and I almost hit it in north of Sweden, and it's scary. But I got used to the moose, so I knew how to. Yeah. So this is what we did with Vario. We were able to drive on the track and being able to replace the dashboard, connected to all the sensors of the car, overriding signals that we were prototyping with, adding the albino moose in front and see if the car responds or like the user's brakes faster. And with this way, we can actually improve our product and allows us to do more iterations and save a lot of costs. We don't need to do as many physical tracks. Then when COVID hit, we were looking at remote collaboration tools. As I said, it's hard to build a car on Zoom. And it's like, how do we actually make this available to other people and other departments? Because it is complex. There is like design, there is manufacturing, ergonomics, and it's like meetings about meetings. And it's like, that's how corporate works. And to do that also in a global scale, as we have offices in California, in Charleston, in Ghent, in China, in Sweden, it is complex to keep it all together. So we actually need to be able to put people in the context, understand what tools are available and how we can actually do this collaboration together. And by doing this and pushing the boundaries together with Vario, I woke up, when did we launch the XR1? Maybe 2018, was it? Yeah. We were in San Francisco, and that morning I woke up to this. Like, we were all over the place, and people were asking, like, why is a company like yours so focused on XR, and kind of spread it across the company. Usually you have one lab isolated that they're experimenting a bit, but it's not getting adopted. And of course we did a lot of mistakes where we went too broad. Like, we ordered 50 HoloLenses and we say that everyone in the factory will wear HoloLenses and walk around. And we were not there yet, like there's so many limitations. And now we are able to actually not only improve our processes, but also apply it to other domains. Like, okay, what we learned, can we actually give that back to the city? So now Gothenburg is doing like virtual Gothenburg project, and it's like quite complex. Like, you have so many data layers, so many stakeholders, you have simulated data, you have real-time data, and everyone needs a format. And then again, like a tool like Omniverse, where everyone can work in their own tool and can contribute and consume data the way they wanted. This really enables us to actually build something valuable and not just for the sake of, hey, let's have a digital twin. And then of course it's like all the information layer, but also how can we make an entertainment layer to it. And this studio from Finland, Zoan, is actually doing like a Gothenburg metaverse where actually people can interact, go to art galleries, go to virtual concerts. And that's getting interesting because you make that available and you democratize it to the rest of the world. So I was talking in the morning of these unknowns and a bit of my shift from only the tools to actually see how can we actually build a future and not only the product. How can we take components apart? And I'm a big fan of Macaulay Nodge, like the founder of the new Bauhaus school in Chicago, where he actually set up some principles. And if you look to that, you see that the iPhone, the Dove soap bar, and the Arne Jacobsen chair, they all come from the same school of thought, the same aesthetics principles, the same, functions they are serving. Like the school of thought produced different artifacts for different usage, but it comes from the same thing. You would identify that, oh, I recognize that artifact or product. It must come from there. So we're thinking, how do I actually have that mentality and apply it, to actually do different artifacts? If we deconstruct the car, the safety values, the sustainability, and actually produce something else for the future, for the society. Because maybe people, for instance, in Jakarta, they have a different sense of safety and mobility than we do in Sweden or in Detroit or so on. So to do that, we use this wall building technique to actually understand the holistic view on the world, see how the things are connected, the different domains, and be able to ask these better questions, like what if, what not. And we work with Alex McDowell, the creative director of Fight Club, Minority Report, some Black Mirror episodes. And we were learning from Hollywood how to actually imagine and articulate the future that we want to be part of, and see, okay, what things we need to do in order to be relevant, what things we need to do in order to have a rosy future and not get dystopic so fast, and being able to show multiple scenarios and identify the actions that we need to do, the investments we need to do, the ecosystem we need to create to achieve that. So we took and we did a lot of research. We tried to understand the genome and the DNA of Volvo. We look at how was Volvo in the 70s. There's this scenario where we actually gave 1,000 Volvos to North Korea in the 70s, and we're still not paid for them. There were rumors that we're still invoicing, but nothing came out. And, as a story, yeah, it was like, okay, wow, what happened? But then we were asking, and we actually interviewed the ambassador of North Korea from Sweden. He's like 95. We had to prep him that, hey, it's not an investigation. We're doing research. We want to see what happened. What was the political context, the economical value? Was this a diplomatic act for Europe, or like what happened? But then we actually identified how intertwined and complex the things are. It's not only the technology, it's not only the medium that we're using actually to see the future, but how do actually, if we want to build a better world together, we need to tweak all these small components together. And then the last part is, as I'm talking a lot about art lately, we all saw this, new stable diffusion, mid-journey, and it's really interesting what you can do with them today. So we are also using them for mood boarding and see, okay, if we describe this future on what we did with world building, can we actually add a visual vocabulary and actually make it a bit relatable, but for a specific culture? So if we have a conversation in South Africa or South America or Sweden about these values, about this complexity and problems, can we actually visualize it or find a specific visual language to actually communicate with them and create then virtual experiences to actually make it relatable to them? So I would nudge people and advise everyone to stay ahead of the curve. Don't be afraid of the tools. Learn how to master them. Don't be a slave of the tools. Just, try to see how the tools that we have today, the technology, can actually help us build a better future. Thank you.